Laura Rodriguez had arrived early at school that morning. As a biology teacher at San Miguel de Allende School, she always made a point of preparing her classes in advance. As she passed through the hallway leading to the principal's office, she stopped abruptly. Upon hearing raised voices, the deep voice of the principal, Carlos Mendez, mixed with that of a student Laura, recognized instantly. Mateo, one of the brightest but also most problematic students in the school. Laura approached quietly, curious and concerned about the tone of the conversation. Mateo, you know what you have to do. Don't fail me this time, understood? Carlos's voice sounded threatening, very different from his usual friendly and understanding tone he used in public. Yes, sir, but I'm not sure this is right. Mateo's insecurity was palpable, increasing. Laura's unease. Do as I say, and everything will be fine for you. Remember what's at stake. The conversation was abruptly interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Laura hid around a corner, her heart racing. When the voices faded and the footsteps receded, Laura stood there for a moment, reflecting on what she had heard. Something very dark was happening, and she had to find out what it was. Laura couldn't get the conversation out of her mind all day. She decided she couldn't sit idly by. That afternoon, she went to an electronics store and bought a small hidden camera. The idea of spying on the principal made her stomach turn, but she felt she had no other choice. Taking advantage of lunch hour, when Carlos usually left his office, Laura sneaked in. With trembling hands, she placed the camera behind some books on the shelf, making sure it had a good view of the principal's desk. She knew she was crossing a line, but the safety of her students was at stake. Over the next few days, Laura reviewed the recordings at home each night, anxiously, looking for any clue of the conversation she had overheard. What she discovered was much worse than she had imagined. Carlos was not only manipulating Mateo, but he was also exploiting several vulnerable students for financial gain and personal favors. The evidence was irrefutable. Laura felt a mix of indignation and despair. She couldn't handle this alone. She needed help, someone she could trust. That's when she thought of Julian, the school janitor. He was a quiet and observant man, always willing to help. If anyone could keep a secret and act cautiously, it was him. That night, Laura decided that the next day she would talk to Julian. They were about to embark on a dangerous but necessary journey to protect their students and uncover the corruption lurking beneath the surface of their beloved school. Laura had barely slept the night before, her mind occupied by the images and conversations captured by the hidden camera. The revelations were devastating. She knew she couldn't delay the conversation with Julian, the school janitor, any longer. She needed someone she could trust, and Julian had always shown impeccable integrity. The next morning, Laura headed to the small maintenance room where Julian usually was before starting his workday. She knocked softly on the door and, upon hearing a "Come in," entered. Julian looked up from his work, surprised to see Laura there so early. "Julian, I need to talk to you." "It's very serious," Laura said, closing the door behind her. Julian put his tools aside and looked at her with concern. "Sure, Laura. What's going on?" Laura sat on one of the available chairs and, with a trembling voice, began to explain everything. The suspicious conversation she had overheard, the installation of the hidden camera, and what she had discovered in the recordings. As she spoke, Julian's face grew somber. When she finished, there was a long silence. Julian stood up, walked to the window, and looked outside thoughtfully. "I knew something was wrong with Carlos," he finally said. "I always saw him too, interested in student affairs, but I never imagined this. We have to do something, but we must be very careful. Carlos is powerful and has many contacts." Laura nodded. "We need more evidence. We can't just accuse him without something that incriminates him definitively." Together, they decided to continue recording Carlos's activities. Laura would review the recordings daily, while Julian would discreetly gather additional information by talking to students and observing any unusual behavior. The days passed slowly, filled with tension and anxiety. Each new recording was another piece of the puzzle, revealing the extent of Carlos's corruption scheme. Laura and Julian discovered that Carlos not only extorted students but also diverted school funds for his personal benefit. He even manipulated grades and threatened those who dared to question him. One afternoon, while reviewing the latest recordings, Laura and Julian found something that chilled them to the bone. Mateo, the student Laura had overheard in the initial conversation, was being pressured to hand over a considerable amount of money to avoid being expelled. Carlos's voice was cold and calculating, making it clear he didn't care about ruining Mateo's life if he didn't comply with his demands. "This is enough," Julian said, his face serious. "We have to confront Mateo. He can give us more information and, hopefully, he'll be willing to help us." That night, Laura and Julian waited until everyone had left the school. They knew Mateo often stayed late in the library, trying to catch up on his studies. They found him there, alone, with tired eyes and a defeated expression. "Mateo, we need to talk to you," Laura said softly. Mateo looked at them with surprise and fear but slowly nodded. They moved to a quiet corner of the library where they could talk without being interrupted. "We know what Carlos is doing to you," Julian began, "and we want to help you, but we need you to tell us everything." Mateo hesitated at first, but then, with tears in his eyes, he started to speak. He confessed how Carlos had manipulated and threatened him, exploiting his family and financial situation to force him to do things against his principles. "I didn't want to, but I saw no other way out," Mateo sobbed. Laura hugged him, trying to offer some comfort. "We're going to stop him, Mateo," she said firmly, "but we need your help. Together, we can gather more evidence and expose him. You're not alone in this." With Mateo's determination added to theirs, Laura and Julian knew they were closer to their goal. The battle was just beginning, but there was no turning back now. Laura and Julian sat with Mateo in the library, in a discreet corner away from curious eyes. Mateo, visibly burdened, began to recount his story. Each word that came out of his mouth confirmed Laura and Julian's suspicions. Carlos had been manipulating and exploiting the most vulnerable students, taking advantage of their needs and fears. "It all started a few months ago," Mateo explained. "My parents were going through financial difficulties, and I was desperate to find a way to help them. Carlos noticed my situation and offered me help, but that help came with conditions. First, it was just small favors, then he started asking for more serious things. He threatened to expel me if I didn't comply." Tears ran down Mateo's cheeks, but there was a firm resolve in his voice. Laura and Julian exchanged a look. They knew they had to act carefully and precisely. "Mateo, we need more evidence to ensure Carlos can't escape from this," Julian said, softly but firmly. "Can you help us get it?" Mateo nodded slowly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want others to go through what I did." The plan was set in motion the next day. Laura continued collecting recordings from the hidden camera, while Julian and Mateo searched for documents and any other evidence they could find. Mateo, taking advantage of his position as Carlos's favorite, gained access to emails, messages, and financial records that demonstrated the principles. Corruption. Each new piece of information painted an increasingly darker and more sinister picture of Carlos's operations. One afternoon, while reviewing the latest recordings, Laura found something crucial. Carlos was in his office, talking on the phone with someone named Alejandro. The conversation made it clear that Carlos was not the only one involved in the corrupt scheme. The state education secretary was also implicated. "We have to be very careful," Laura said, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "This is bigger than we thought." With the new evidence in hand, they decided it was time to confront Carlos. They knew they needed a careful strategy to ensure the authorities took their findings seriously. They decided that the Science Day celebration at the school would be the perfect opportunity to expose Carlos to the school community. In the days leading up to the event, Laura and Julian worked tirelessly, organizing the evidence and ensuring everything was ready. They spoke with some trusted parents and teachers who were willing to support their cause. The Science Day arrived, and the school was full of energy and excitement. The students were presenting their projects, and the parents were moving from one stand to another. Laura and Julian, with Mateo by their side, waited nervously for the right moment. Finally, it was Laura's turn to speak. She approached the microphone and, with a firm voice, began to explain what they had discovered. At first, there were murmurs of surprise and disbelief among the audience. But when she started showing the recordings and documents, silence fell over the room. "Carlos Mendez has been exploiting our students for his personal gain," Laura said, her voice resonating in the auditorium. "And he's not alone. We've discovered evidence that the state education secretary, Alejandro, is also involved." The shock was immediate. Parents and teachers looked at the evidence with horror. Carlos, who was present, tried to leave, but was stopped by several parents and teachers. The police, who had been alerted beforehand, arrived quickly and arrested him on the spot. Mateo, along with Laura and Julian, watched as Carlos was taken away. There was a sense of relief, but also a recognition that the battle was not yet over. With Alejandro still at large, they knew the road to justice would be long and arduous. However, at that moment, they enjoyed a small victory. They had taken the first big step to clean up the corruption in their school, and the community joined in a strong applause of gratitude and support. Laura looked at Mateo and Julian, knowing that together they could face whatever came next. The auditorium was filled with tense and anticipatory energy. Laura, Julian, and Mateo were at the center of the stage, with the evidence organized and ready to be presented. The Science Day celebration had been the perfect event to gather parents, students, and teachers, but the festive atmosphere had given way to cautious expectation when Laura took the microphone. "Good afternoon, everyone," Laura began, her voice resonating in the silent auditorium. "Today, in addition to celebrating the incredible talent and effort of our students, we must address a very serious matter that affects our school community." There were murmurs of unease among the crowd, but Laura maintained her steady gaze and continued. "Over the past few weeks, we have been investigating suspicious activities within our school. What we have discovered is alarming, and we can no longer remain silent." The first images and recordings began to be projected on the screen behind her. The faces in the audience showed a mix of shock and horror as they watched and listened to the conversations recorded between Carlos and several students, including Mateo. The evidence was clear and compelling, revealing the corruption and exploitation scheme in which Carlos was involved. "This is just a part of what we have found," Julian said, taking over. "Carlos Mendez has been manipulating and exploiting our students, threatening and extorting them for his own benefit." The silence was broken by a growing murmur of indignation and surprise. Carlos, who had been watching from the back of the room, stood up abruptly and began to head for the exit. However, several parents and teachers quickly moved to block his way. The tension in the auditorium increased as Carlos tried to defend himself. "This is a plot," he shouted, his voice full of desperation. "You don't have enough evidence to accuse me of anything." Laura raised a hand, asking for silence. "We have all the evidence we need," she said calmly, "and the authorities are also aware." At that moment, the police, who had been alerted beforehand, entered the auditorium. The officers approached Carlos and, after a brief confrontation, handcuffed him and took him away. The room erupted in a mix of applause and cries of relief and pent-up fury. Mateo, with tears in his eyes, turned to Laura and Julian. "Thank you," he whispered. "I couldn't have done it without you." Laura hugged him, feeling a mix of relief and determination. She knew this was just the beginning. While Carlos was being taken away, the school community began to gather around Laura, Julian, and Mateo, offering words of support and gratitude. "We have to move forward," Laura said, her voice firm but filled with emotion. "Carlos didn't act alone. There are more people involved, and we must ensure that they all face justice." That night, as the auditorium emptied and people returned to their homes, Laura, Julian, and Mateo stayed a moment longer, absorbing the magnitude of what they had achieved. They had exposed a network of corruption and taken the first step towards justice. "This doesn't end here," Julian said, looking at his companions. "We still have to face Alejandro and anyone else involved. But for now, we can be proud of what we have done today." Laura nodded, feeling a renewed strength. She knew the road would be long and difficult, but with allies like Julian and Mateo, she was ready to face any challenge. They left the auditorium together, certain that they had initiated a significant change in their community and would continue fighting until justice fully prevailed. The calm after the storm was deceptive. Although Carlos had been arrested, Laura, Julian, and Mateo knew that the corruption network was more extensive and that their fight was just beginning. The name Alejandro, the state education secretary, had repeatedly appeared in the recordings, and they were all determined to take the investigation to the very end. One afternoon, Laura and Julian met at a discreet cafe in downtown San Miguel de Allende. Mateo, who had decided to fully involve himself in the investigation, was also present. Their faces reflected determination and palpable fatigue. "We need to be meticulous and make sure every step we take is backed by solid evidence," Laura said, breaking the silence. "Alejandro is a powerful figure, and dismantling his network won't be easy." Julian nodded. "We need more evidence linking him directly to Carlos's activities. We can't let him get away." Mateo, with a resolute expression, added, "I can talk to some of the other students. Many of them know more than they say, but they're scared. If I explain what we're doing, they might be encouraged to speak up." Laura looked at Mateo with appreciation. "That's an excellent idea. We could also look for documents and financial records showing the connection between Carlos and Alejandro. We need to be thorough." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Mateo talked to several students, gaining their trust and gathering their testimonies. Laura and Julian reviewed files, emails, and records that might link Alejandro to the acts of corruption. The more they investigated, the more evident it became that the corruption was deeply rooted in the educational system. One night, while reviewing documents at Laura's house, they found a key piece: financial record showing irregular fund transfers from Alejandro's office to accounts controlled by Carlos. This was what they needed, a direct and tangible connection. "This is enough to take to the authorities," Julian said, a spark of hope in his eyes. "But we need to make sure it's presented in a way that can't be ignored or dismissed." Laura nodded. "I'm going to contact some of the parents and teachers who supported us before. If we can get the community to rally behind us, it will be much harder for Alejandro to escape this." The community's response was overwhelming. Parents and teachers, outraged by the scale of the corruption, joined forces to plan a peaceful protest and a press conference. Ana, a local journalist who had been covering Carlos's story, was immediately interested and offered to help expose the case on a national level. We need this story to reach everyone, Anna said during one of their meetings. Public pressure will be crucial to ensuring the authorities act quickly and justly. On the day of the press conference, the main square of San Miguel de Allende was filled with people. Parents, students, teachers, and concerned citizens gathered to hear what Laura, Julian, Mateo, and Anna had to say. The tension in the air was palpable. Laura took the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you all for being here. Today, we are going to reveal the truth about the corruption that has been infecting our educational system. With each word, her determination grew, and the audience listened attentively. Anna presented the evidence, including the financial records linking Alejandro to Carlos. The evidence was overwhelming, and the outrage of the crowd grew as the details were revealed. This cannot go unpunished, Julian declared firmly. We have witnessed how corruption destroys lives and weakens our institutions. It's time to say enough. The peaceful protest turned into a clamor for justice that resonated throughout the community. The authorities had no choice but to act. Alejandro was detained, and a thorough investigation into his activities was launched. Laura, Julian, and Mateo knew there was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, they felt that justice was possible. The community of San Miguel de Allende was more united than ever, and together, they would continue fighting until all the culprits were brought to justice. With Alejandro detained and the community united in their fight against corruption, Laura, Julian, and Mateo felt encouraged but knew there was still much to do. The investigation into Alejandro's corrupt activities revealed new layers of complicity and cover-up within the educational system. It was clear they needed more evidence and testimonies to ensure that everyone involved faced justice. One afternoon, while they were meeting in the teacher's lounge, Laura proposed an idea. We need to gather more testimonies and documents that show the extent of this corruption network. We need to talk to other teachers and students who might have been affected. Julian nodded. I know some teachers who have suspected irregularities but never dared to speak out. If we show them they're not alone, they might be encouraged to share what they know. Mateo, who had shown remarkable bravery and determination, added, I can also talk to more students. Many are scared, but if I explain that this is to stop those who have hurt them, they might be encouraged to give their testimony. Over the next few weeks, Laura, Julian, and Mateo worked tirelessly. Laura met with several teachers outside the school, in cafes and parks, where they felt safer to talk. Some shared stories of manipulation and extortion they had witnessed or experienced themselves. Others handed over documents and emails showing suspicious directives from Alejandro's office. Julian, for his part, used his position as a janitor to talk to administrative and maintenance staff. He discovered that several of them had seen strange movements of funds and resources but never dared to report it for fear of losing their jobs. With their support, he gained access to files and records showing the diversion of funds intended for school improvements. Mateo became a vital bridge between the students and the investigators. He talked to his peers, sharing his own experience and encouraging them not to be afraid. Many students, inspired by his bravery, began to come forward with their own stories of coercion and abuse by Carlos and other officials. Their testimonies were heartbreaking, but necessary to build a solid case. One night, while reviewing the information gathered at Laura's house, they found a clear pattern. Funds intended for scholarships and aid programs had been systematically diverted to accounts controlled by Alejandro and his accomplices. There were also emails showing how Alejandro had given explicit instructions to Carlos and other principals to manipulate grades and threaten students. This is bigger than we thought, Julian said, looking at the documents with a mix of indignation and resolution. But now we have what we need to take this to the authorities and ensure there is no escape. Laura nodded. We need to present all this in an organized and forceful manner. We must make sure that every piece of evidence and testimony is backed by documentation. With Anna's help, they prepared a detailed and comprehensive report. Anna, using her contacts, ensured that the case received the necessary media attention. She published a series of articles narrating the stories of affected students and teachers, presenting the evidence clearly and accessibly to the public. The impact was immediate. The authorities, pressured by the media attention and public outrage, had no choice but to act. A thorough investigation of the state educational system was announced, and several officials were suspended while investigations were conducted. Laura, Julian, and Mateo knew there was still a long way to go, but every step they took brought justice closer to those who had been exploited and manipulated. The fight continued, but now they had the support of an entire community determined to eradicate corruption and rebuild their educational system on foundations of integrity and transparency. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity and emotions. The detailed report, prepared by Laura, Julian, Mateo, and Anna, had made a significant impact, but they knew the battle was not yet won. The corruption was deep-rooted, and those responsible had powerful resources and allies. It was in this context that they found unexpected support from Anna, the local journalist, who decided to fully involve herself in their cause. One morning, Anna met with them at their usual cafe. She had a determined expression and a thick folder in her hand. "I've been investigating on my own," she said, opening the folder and showing a series of documents. These are contacts of other journalists and activists who are also interested in exposing corruption in the education system. With their help, we can increase public pressure and ensure this case doesn't get lost in bureaucracy. Laura, Julian, and Mateo exchanged surprised and grateful looks. They knew Anna had experience and resources they did not possess, and her offer of help was a ray of hope in the midst of the storm. "Thank you, Anna," Laura said, moved. "Your support is invaluable. The more of us there are, the harder it will be for them to ignore us." Anna smiled. "We're in this together. Let's plan a series of articles and reports that keep the case in the public eye. We'll also organize interviews with some of the students and teachers who have given their testimony. It's crucial that their voices are heard." In the following days, Anna worked tirelessly, publishing articles that detailed not only the facts of the case, but also the human stories behind them. The stories of the exploited students, the teachers who had tried to resist, and a community that refused to give up, resonated deeply with the audience. Anna's reports were widely shared on social media, and soon, national media began to take an interest in the case. With increasing public pressure, Laura, Julian, and Mateo continued their work of collecting evidence. Anna arranged a meeting with several influential journalists who also wanted to collaborate. Among them was Martin, an investigative journalist with a formidable reputation for his work on government corruption cases. "What you've accomplished so far is impressive," Martin said during the meeting. "We'll coordinate our efforts to ensure this case reaches the highest levels of power. We need irrefutable evidence and compelling testimonies." Laura, feeling renewed hope, shared everything they had gathered so far. Martin and his team began reviewing and corroborating every document and testimony, ensuring everything was in order for maximum impact. In parallel, Anna organized a series of interviews with students and teachers willing to speak publicly. The interviews were emotional and powerful, each story a testament to the abuse and manipulation they had suffered. The educational community, seeing the courage of those who spoke out, began to rally more strongly, demanding justice and transparency. One of the most impactful interviews was with Mateo. With a firm voice and determined look, He recounted his experience from the moment Carlos began, manipulating him to the fight to gather evidence with Laura and Julian. His testimony not only moved the audience but also inspired other students to speak out. Corruption cannot continue to rule our lives, Mateo declared in the interview. We're here to change things, and we won't stop until all the guilty face justice. With each published article and conducted interview, the pressure on the authorities increased. The official investigation progressed, and several officials were called to testify. Alejandro, though not yet arrested, was under increasing surveillance and public scrutiny. One night, while reviewing the progress at Laura's house, they received a call from Ana. "We have a unique opportunity," she said excitedly. "A national news program wants to do an in-depth coverage of the case. This could be the final blow we need to ensure Alejandro can't escape." Laura, Julian, and Mateo looked at each other, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. They knew this was crucial. The next phase of their fight was about to begin, and with the support of Ana, Martín, and other unexpected allies, they were more prepared than ever to face whatever came. "Let's do it," Laura said with renewed firmness. "For our students, for our community, we won't stop until justice prevails." And so, with new allies and unwavering determination, they prepared for the decisive confrontation that could change the fate of their school and perhaps the entire state educational system. The decisive moment was near. Laura, Julian, Mateo, Ana, and Martín had worked tirelessly to gather evidence and build a solid case against Alejandro and his corruption network. The media pressure, thanks to Ana's articles and reports, had reached a peak, and the community of San Miguel de Allende was more united than ever in their call for justice. The day of the decisive confrontation arrived with a cloudy sky, as if even the weather reflected the tension of the moment. The press conference and national news program had been meticulously coordinated. Laura and Julian were nervous, but the presence of their allies gave them confidence. The event took place in the central square of San Miguel de Allende, a symbolic location where the community had celebrated many victories and faced many struggles. The square was filled with parents, students, teachers, and concerned citizens, all waiting to hear the truth. Ana took the microphone first, addressing the crowd and the cameras broadcasting live nationally. "Thank you all for being here. Today, we present irrefutable evidence of the corruption that has infected our educational system. We're not just talking about a corrupt principal but a network that reaches the highest levels of state government." With a signal, the giant screens in the square began to show the collected evidence. Emails, financial records, and testimonies from students and teachers. Each document, each word, painted a clear and condemning picture of Alejandro's corruption. Martín, the investigative journalist, took the floor. "We have verified and corroborated every piece of information presented here. The evidence leaves no doubt. Alejandro has been diverting funds, manipulating grades, and exploiting students for his own benefit. This is unacceptable and must be stopped." The crowd murmured, their indignation growing with each revelation. Alejandro, who had tried to stay in the shadows, now found himself at the center of a storm he could not control. Laura, with a firm and clear voice, addressed the audience. "We are not here just to denounce corruption, but to demand change. Our students deserve an education system based on integrity and justice. We cannot allow those who abuse their power to remain in their positions." Mateo, visibly emotional but determined, added, "I have experienced the consequences of this corruption firsthand. We cannot remain silent. We must fight for a better future for all of us." The media coverage was immediate and extensive. The authorities, pressured by public opinion and overwhelming evidence, had no choice but to act quickly. Alejandro was called to testify and faced with irrefutable proof, could not deny his involvement. He was arrested that same night. While the community watched with relief and satisfaction, the arrest of Alejandro was just the beginning of a series of investigations and purges. Within the state educational system, several corrupt officials were identified and removed, and new measures were implemented to ensure transparency and accountability. Laura, Julian, and Mateo, though exhausted, felt revitalized by the outcome of their fight. They knew they had achieved something significant, not just for their school but for the entire state. The central square, which had been the scene of so many emotions, now resonated with the echo of justice. At a community meeting held days later, Laura was recognized for her courage and determination. This would not have been possible without the incredible community that supported us, she said, with tears of gratitude in her eyes. This is just the beginning. We will continue working to ensure our schools are safe and fair places for all students. Julian, always modest, added, "We have shown that when the community comes together, it can face any challenge. The fight against corruption is an ongoing battle, but today we have taken a great step towards justice." Ana and Martín, though not seeking recognition, were acclaimed for their crucial role in exposing the case. Ana, with her unwavering dedication to journalism, and Martín, with his ability to uncover corruption, had been fundamental pillars in this fight. As the community celebrated, Laura, Julian, and Mateo took a moment to reflect on all they had achieved. They knew there was still work to be done, but at that moment, they allowed themselves to enjoy the victory. "This is just the beginning," Laura said, smiling at her companions. "Together, we can achieve anything." And so, with the spirit of unity and determination, they prepared to build a better future, one where justice and truth always prevailed. The news of Alejandro's arrest and the exposure of the corruption within the state educational system resonated throughout the community of San Miguel de Allende and beyond. However, the path to full justice was still underway. The legal process against Alejandro and his accomplices would not be easy, but Laura, Julian, Mateo, Ana, and Martín were determined to see this through to the end. Alejandro's trial began weeks after his arrest. The courtroom was packed with journalists, parents, teachers, and students, all eager to see how the case would unfold. Laura, Julian, and Mateo sat in the front row, along with Ana and Martín, ready to support the witnesses and ensure the truth prevailed. During the trial, the testimonies of the students and teachers were crucial. Mateo was one of the first to testify. With a firm voice, he recounted his experience of being manipulated and exploited by Carlos, and how Alejandro had been behind many of the orders. His words were clear and convincing, leaving a lasting impression on the jury. Laura and Julian also testified, presenting the evidence they had gathered. The emails, financial records, and audio and video recordings painted an undeniable picture of the systemic corruption orchestrated by Alejandro. Each piece of evidence added weight to Alejandro's guilt and his accomplices. Ana and Martín, though not testifying, continued their work from the outside, publishing articles and reports that kept the public informed and engaged with the case. Their work was crucial in maintaining pressure on the authorities and ensuring the trial was conducted with transparency and justice. The trial lasted several weeks. Finally, the moment of the verdict arrived. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as the judge prepared to read the decision. With a firm voice, the judge declared Alejandro guilty of all charges. The sentence was severe, reflecting the gravity of his crimes and the devastating impact he had on the community. The courtroom erupted in applause and tears of relief. Laura, Julian, and Mateo embraced, feeling a mix of joy and release. They had achieved what seemed impossible. They had exposed and defeated a network of corruption that had infected their educational system. Alejandro, along with several of his accomplices, was taken to prison, and additional investigations were launched to ensure all those involved face justice. The state educational system began a process of cleansing and renewal with new leaders, committed to transparency and integrity. With the trial concluded, the school began to recover. Laura, Julian, and Mateo, along with other teachers and parents, formed a committee to oversee the reforms and ensure they were properly implemented. They wanted to ensure that corruption never again took root in their community. One afternoon, after a committee meeting, Laura stayed at the school a bit later than usual. Walking through the halls, she observed students working on their projects and teachers collaborating with each other. There was a sense of hope and renewal in the air. Julian approached her, a smile on his face. "We've done something incredible here, Laura." She nodded, moved. "Yes, we have. But this is just the beginning. We have to keep working to make sure our schools are safe and fair places for everyone." Mateo, who had joined them, added, "We've shown that together we're stronger. We can't stop now. There's much more to do." With the continued support of the community and the tireless dedication of people like Laura, Julian, and Mateo, the school became a symbol of the fight against corruption and the power of unity. Students and teachers found inspiration in their story and committed to keeping alive the values of integrity and justice they had so bravely defended. In a special ceremony, the community recognized Laura, Julian, Mateo, Anna, and Martine for their bravery and dedication. It was a moment of celebration and reflection, a reminder of what can be achieved when one fights for what is right. Laura, looking at the gathered crowd, felt a deep gratitude. She knew the road to justice was long and sometimes difficult, but she also knew that with the support of her community, they could face any challenge. "This is just the beginning," she said with a smile. "Together, we can achieve anything." And so, with the spirit of unity and determination, they prepared to build a better future, one where justice and truth always prevailed. The months following Alejandro's trial were a period of transformation for San Miguel de Allende and its educational system. With corrupt leaders ousted and a new team committed to integrity and power, the school began to flourish like never before. Laura, Julian, Mateo, Anna, and Martine became pillars of this new era, dedicating their efforts to rebuilding and strengthening the educational community. One sunny afternoon, the school organized a special ceremony to honor those who had fought bravely against corruption. The auditorium was meticulously decorated, and the atmosphere was charged with emotion and hope. Students, parents, teachers, and citizens gathered to celebrate the end of a dark chapter and the beginning of a new one. Laura, standing on the stage alongside Julian, Mateo, Anna, and Martine, felt overwhelmed by gratitude and pride. She took the microphone and looked at the audience, her friends and companions in this struggle. "Today, we celebrate not only the end of an era of corruption but the beginning of a future full of promises and opportunities," Laura began. "We have shown that when we unite, we can face any challenge and overcome it." The crowd erupted in applause. Julian, with a warm smile, added, "This is the result of the effort and bravery of each one of you. Together, we have built a community that refuses to accept injustice." Mateo, who had grown and matured significantly during the struggle, addressed his fellow students. "Our voice matters. We must never be afraid to stand up for what is right. This school is ours, and it is our duty to protect and improve it." Anna and Martine, although modest about their role, were applauded for their tireless journalistic work. Anna took the microphone, visibly moved. "The truth always prevails. when there are people willing to defend it. I am proud to have been part of this community and to have told your stories. Martine nodded. Journalism has the power to change the world. And today, we have seen how the truth can topple even the most powerful. The ceremony continued with the presentation of awards and recognitions to students and teachers who had demonstrated exceptional commitment to justice and integrity. Among the awardees, Mateo received a special scholarship to continue his studies, a symbol of the new opportunities now available to all students. Over time, the school became a model of transparency and excellence. Innovative educational programs were implemented, and students thrived in an environment of support and respect. The community, revitalized by the struggle and victory, continued to work together to ensure that corruption was never allowed to take root again. One day, while walking through the renovated school halls, Laura stopped to observe a new commemorative plaque at the entrance. The inscription read, "In honor of those who fought for justice and truth, and to all the students and teachers who continue to uphold these values every day. Together, we build a bright future." Julian approached Laura, reading the inscription. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Laura nodded, with a serene smile. "Yes, and there's still much to do. But now we know we can face anything together." With the certainty that the community was on the right path, Laura, Julian, Mateo, Anna, and Martine continued their work, each from their own field, but always united by a common purpose: to ensure that justice, truth, and integrity were the foundations on which the future was built. The school, once a symbol of corruption, was transformed into a beacon of hope and righteousness, inspiring other institutions to follow its example. And so, with each new day, Laura and her companions remembered that true power lies in unity and the unwavering will to fight for a better world. "That's it, boss," Laura thought, as she contemplated the vibrant community they had helped build. "This is the new beginning we dreamed of. What an exciting journey we've just experienced together. But this is only the beginning." Click on the next video that appears on your screen and keep enjoying amazing content. If you want me to keep bringing you these stories every day, consider supporting me with a coffee through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the pinned comment. Your support is what makes it possible for me to keep telling these stories. See you in the next video.